Well, folks, I want to welcome you one and all to the Carolina Public Humanities Virtual Happy Hour. We've been doing the Virtual Humanities Happy Hour. We've been doing this now, since mid-March. As you know, the world stopped doing normal things over a month ago, and we have pivoted and tried to do as much as we can. I want to thank everybody who has been supportive of the university and of Carolina Public Humanities, including our sponsors, Cotton Merker Group at Morgan Stanley, the Carolina Meadows, a retirement community in Chapel Hill, as well as our partner in these projects and for many projects coming up over the course of our online existence in this period, the General Alumni Association, a partner in this project and others, which I'll be mentioning in a moment. And of course, our old partner in the Humanities Happy Hour, back when we used to do it live, and we could all eat the same food, the Institute for the Arts and Humanities, another great partner in this project. I want to thank all of them, thank all of our supporters around there, people who are checking in from their homes, coming and joining us. It's really a delight to know that we can stay connected. It is absolutely no substitute for the real thing, but we're really pleased that we are able to have this forum. I want to point out a few things, important events. We will have, on Wednesday, we'll be having an event called Restaurant Culture in a Post-Pandemic World. It starts at 5 o'clock. Again, this is the part of the food security series that our new Associate Director, Joanna Sirk-Smith, is putting on, and that's 5 o'clock next Wednesday. Next Thursday, we are going to not have a Humanities Happy Hour, but the very first event we put on in this whole COVID world was a Think Fast Forum with the General Alumni Association. The General Alumni Association has these wonderful Think Fast forums in which we respond to events as they are happening and bring scholars in to give their commentary. We did our first one of these the very week of that this all started on Thursday. Now all the dates run into one, but on Thursday, I believe it was March 19th, we had a Think Fast forum on the COVID crisis that ended up having to be on this format. We are doing it again next week, and a very important topic on mental health during this period. We're going to have scholars and practitioners of mental health talking about the ramifications, remedies, and impact of this particular crisis on mental health throughout the country and throughout the world. We don't call that a happy hour. So no happy hour next week, a Think Fast forum. Unfortunately, there's no happy hour the next week on May 7th because we will have the Carolina Public Humanities board meeting, but we do have a great event on May 6th, another Talking Humanities event in which Professor Lloyd Kramer and myself will be engaging with a small group of people on an article. We are pulling articles out of common papers, or not out of the popular press, that have to do with COVID, and then having a scholarly discussion about the ramifications of them. So all great things. I'll have some other events to bring on board. I also wanted to mention to you folks, before we introduce our speakers, down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the chat feature here. I encourage all of you at any time during and there's also a question and answer feature. During any time today, if for any of the speakers, at any time you can put your questions in. At the end of our event today, we'll be having an opportunity to go through and read and address as many of your questions as we can. Please don't be shy, folks. We would like to have more questions than we've had in the last few weeks, so we hope that today's panelists and discussions do inspire you to be curious about more. So now let us introduce our speakers, and I want to first invite Claudia Yaghoobi to the screen, and watch this magic. See that? It's magic. With the wonderful artwork behind you. We know that's your own original. Welcome, Claudia. Thank you for joining us. Claudia is a professor in the Department of Asian Studies, but not just a professor, an associate professor, because was it today, in fact? It was today that someone has attained tenure. So if I could just ask you people down at the bottom here, I wish I had the reaction. I could give you the little hand clap reaction. I don't see it down there, but anyway, congratulations, Claudia. How are you holding up?
Hi, Max. Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy. I'm elated, actually, because of the news. But this is the first occasion I have to celebrate it, actually.
A happy hour.
Yeah, at this moment, I can't really celebrate it. So this is a great celebration.
It's a 2D celebration. We're enjoying it. And I should mention that Claudia is an expert on Persian literature, Persian language and culture, and we'll be speaking about events and how COVID is impacting Iran later. let us introduce. So we'll get to that at the as we move through our speakers. But let's bring on our next speaker is John Keefe. John, welcome. You can, John, where is he? There he is. Boom, like magic. Welcome, John. Now, I want to announce something. John and I were supposed to meet for the first time. We had an event on March 28th that we were going to do together. We had a person coming in to talk about North Korea, Jeremy Hunter, and we were going to work on that together, have dinner together, and have a nice opportunity to meet. We're doing it this way, John. Are you okay with this, meeting me on a flat screen?
I very much am. Yes, it's great to meet you, and thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely, and as you can imagine, because John was going to help introduce Jeremy Hunter, John's expertise is on Korean culture, language, and we'll be talking about some developments in Korea as we go into the room. It'll be our second speaker. So welcome, John.
Thank you.
And we'll get to the happy part. And Donny, Santacaterina, come on in, Donny.
Yeah, good
Hello,
job.
sir. Welcome. Donny is a PhD candidate in history, studying modern China. And we're very, very thankful that you could be here with your unique perspective, because you've been doing some work on this very issue. And I'm very pleased that you could join us. Donny, how are you holding up, though? Are you feeling okay in this climate?
I'm feeling a little bit worse for wear. My fiance just tried to bring me a beer for the happy hour, and I gotta say, this banana vanilla stout is just the worst beer that I've tasted in the past 2 months. So I love her.
I'm so sorry.
It's a difficult one. We'll get a different one in the ranks, and then move on from there. I'm sure I'll get over it soon. But yes, all in all, things are going great. Thanks for having me.
Great. I'm delighted to have you. And before we begin with your topic, I also just wanted to ask you your perspective as a graduate student. We forget that, we have our students, and they've certainly had to do a lot of transitions, and graduates and, of course, professors have had to transition to online teaching. And I think graduate students have sort of been left out of like what's going on. We have these people that have to do incredible research. Many of them are also teaching. Many of them are foreign or whatnot. How is your graduate student experience, Donny?
I think a lot of us graduate students are just, this isn't unique to just graduate student populations, but a lot of us are just spinning our wheels, kind of not really sure what might happen next. I have a Fulbright Hayes Fellowship right now, but I'm in the States, so I'm supposed to be in China doing research, and I'm very, 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 very lucky that they've extended my funding, and all that's still coming through. So that's fine, but that's not the case for everyone in graduate school. And it's especially difficult for us to try to plan for the fall when we don't really know what's going to happen next. So a lot of things up in the air. I'm one of the lucky ones, but I think a lot of graduate students are struggling at the moment. It's my advice. What has helped me is, doing things like this, reaching out into some topic that you didn't have time to deal with before. Like today, I'm talking about something totally, not totally, but somewhat outside of my field. That's been fun. That's been stimulating. And I hope that other graduate students are finding those kinds of gratifying research experiences.
The only thing I want to say is I'm sorry that one of those experiences has been banana oatmeal stout or whatever that monstrosity is.
Yeah, but it's an experience nonetheless. Yeah,
it's an experience nonetheless. Well, thank you for coming, and we're going to start with you. And there's a logic in the way that we've organized who we're speaking to. And I sort of put these, as you notice, all of these countries are in Asia. So we're very likely to have another one of these where we might look at another region of the world. It just happened to work that way. But when we had these 3 Asian countries, I figured we would talk to you sort of in the order in which the COVID reality sort of came into the zeitgeist, at least in the United States. And the first country we heard about was China. So, Donny, it's a big ask, but what can you tell us about COVID in China? What are your thoughts? What would you like to focus in on?
So I study global propaganda and media systems in Chinese historical context. So there's a lot that I could talk about in terms of what's actually happening on the ground, what's going on in the news, what stories are being sort of bumped up the ranks in the US, which stories are popular in China. Well, I can't tell you about the on-the-ground conditions because I haven't been there recently. Today I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to talk about something that's a little bit like parallel to my field exactly, but it deals with global propaganda. And basically, I've gotten really interested recently in this concept of the virus potentially originating from a batch of bat soup in Wuhan, China. So I'm not sure if Max, have you heard anything about bats or bat soup in relation to the coronavirus?
It sounds like a heavy metal song that I probably should have learned some point in my musician days. But yes, I've heard about all sorts of varieties of, not to put too fine a point on it, racist assumptions about cuisine and about the way that this originated. So sure, I'm assuming that bat soup might be one of these types of references.
Yes. This is one of the earlier, a story came out in January, and it was first kind of perpetuated by the Daily Mail, which is in the UK. But it gained ground with incredible speed amongst US and European audiences. And I just started to want to unpack that idea of why amongst this coronavirus pandemic, people were becoming so incredibly concerned with Chinese dietary habits in particular. So I guess the first place to start is to thoroughly debunk the idea that coronavirus originated from a batch of bat soup in Wuhan. That story came out in January 24th, and it featured a picture. I could share the picture, but I think most people can Google it on their own. It's a picture of a Chinese internet personality, kind of like an Anthony Bourdain or an Andrew Zimmern, like a food tourist kind of person. It's a picture from 2016 of her in a South Pacific island eating bat soup. And it's a traditional dish in this island called palau. And she was traveling to this place and tried bat soup. That was way back in 2016. Since then, that people have tweeted and sent out this picture, and even news outlets have put up this picture and said, "Look, this is ground zero right here. It's the bat soup."
And it's not even in China, right? Where this
not even in China, no, and from 2016. But that didn't stop a lot of people from becoming really, really concerned or interested, I guess, in this idea of Chinese dietary habits in relation to COVID-19. Now, there's a very, very real connection between the zoonotic transfer of a virus like this from animals to human. It doesn't really happen from eating things directly. It more so happens from fecal matter getting on from one animal to another, and then just being in an environment where genetic DNA can swap.
All these animals together in one place with all different kinds of effluvia and whatnot, right?
Right. And so basically, I guess I'm going to kick off my next part, which is talking about the interest in bat soup, sort of segued into the more legitimate concern about Chinese wet markets, which are those places where you get a lot of exotic animals, wild exotic animals put together in one place, and then people eat them either for traditional Chinese medicine reasons or the same reason that people would eat exotic meat in the United States. I'm thinking of doing some research on this topic. Like there's a trade in zebra meat in the United States, sort of like an exotic thing that you can, say that you've had a zebra steak or something like that. These animals, I mean, that's the closest comparison that I can.
Donny, I had heard about these wet markets, that they're often associated with, sort of a status. In fact, that these aren't your average Chinese citizen who can just walk in, or Chinese worker who can walk in to the wet market and buy a pangolin, for example.
Yeah, they're really expensive. They're really, really, really expensive.
Yeah, so that's an interesting element to this. But please continue on about the wet markets, for sure.
That is.
Can I ask a question, Donny?
Yeah, of course, Claudia. Yeah.
I just very recently heard that the transmission has been actually human to human rather than from an animal to human. Can you talk about that, or is that correct, or is it part of the myth?
Yeah, so I can't say for certain. I'm a historian. I'm going to leave that to the epidemiologist.
Once you get your PhD, you can call yourself a doctor and you can answer any question.
Right, I'm a doctor. This definitely came from human to human. No, there's a lot of the research that I was doing about whether or not this Huanan seafood market in Wuhan was actually ground zero, actually pointed towards the fact that perhaps this was a human-to-human transmission that happened well before anybody actually got to the market, and then the virus spread at the market from human to human.
Yeah.
Because of the timing of how that became the sort of epicenter. So I can't confirm that for sure, but I'm inclined to lean towards that explanation rather than this zoonotic transfer happening at the Huanan seafood market in Wuhan. So anyway, despite all of this evidence, you know, the kind of low-hanging fruit to talk about is that you have a lot of Republican, I guess, talking heads or politicians who I'm going to quote right here that talked a lot about Chinese dietary habits and disease and basically the morality behind eating something like a bat or an exotic animal, right? So on March 2nd was when these stories started to become more and more popular, and Fox News, I know low-hanging fruit, but a host, Jesse Waters, said, I'll tell you why it started in China, because they have these markets where they're eating raw bats and snakes. And so that's, he's saying raw, he's adding something else to the story, you know.
And snakes. And
snakes too, right? But the thing that really got me interested was after this had been on the news cycle for a while, a Texas Senator John Cornyn said, well, this is on March 18th. He said, well, I think China is to blame for COVID-19 because the culture where people eat bats, snakes, and dogs and things like that, these viruses are transmitted from animals to people. So I'm interested especially in we say that this disease hopped from animal to animal. We can see it kind of hopping from suspected this sort of fake story about a bat to perhaps a snake, and then from there it goes to dog, which carries all sorts of racist and xenophobic connotations.
Kind of the most classic of the they eat dogs kind of stereotypes we've heard for decades.
Right, and so as you said, Max, it's classic, right? And what I wanted to speak most about in this conversation is it's classic because it has a long historical background of xenophobia in California or elsewhere in the late 19th century. You have Chinese immigrants come, they're starting to replace domestic labor. People start to say, well, these Chinese are dirty. They eat rats, they eat snakes, they eat these sort of low-tier animals because they're dirty or less hygienic than us, you know? And it plays into this idea where there's an intersection between diet, what's right to eat, what's wrong to eat, and the idea of hygiene and civilization. And that's just something that interested me. I'd love to hear in the chat section for all the people listening right now what their thoughts are on this intersection.
I think it really is interesting, the notion too that that people think of all cultures as sort of static. We just a Chinese culture is static. These wet markets are a development in Chinese culture in and of itself. You have an internationalized marketplace for these animals. You have an incredible increase in wealth. And you have people who are able to expend their wealth on what is a prestige item in many cultures, as you said, eating zebra, look what I got to do.
Right.
So these processes are human processes as opposed to just sort of national stereotypes and whatnot. I mean, is that an accurate statement, perhaps?
Absolutely. I think that you're bringing in the economics of the situation is spot on. Absolutely.
Well, I think we'll have much more to engage with this topic, especially as a person named Christy Noor with the same last name as mine, I think I might be related to this person, has asked, does anyone know where the first human in the human-to-human transfer got it from? And I would say, I'm going to just go out on a limb and say this panel is not going to answer that question, because I'm not sure that even the scientists who are studying this very carefully know exactly where that happened. But yeah, we have a lot to figure out and a lot to learn. And certainly one of the things we can do is to kind of focus on the good parts of humanity, in which we think about how we can all help each other, and maybe shed some of those other parts of our humanity where we like to make stereotypes and make our judgments based on, frankly, false assumptions. So thank you for that, Donny. We're going to come back. Oh, please go ahead, Donny.
If I could just say one last thing.
Yes, please.
Addressing that question. While we don't know the answer, I can point towards one explanation over another. What I'm going to point towards is it has nothing to do with what anybody is eating and putting in their mouths, especially. What it does have more to do with, which this propaganda cycle tends to cause a smokescreen over, is environmental change that displaces certain animals like bats from their habitats and pushes them into more urban areas where people are not eating bats in these circumstances necessarily, but bat droppings can get into anything. It could get into, onto a knife or a sandwich or something like that. That's a potential explanation. It's a much more likely one than.
Yes, I've heard this too, as well, as environmental degradation is pushing animals also together in contact with each other that they weren't necessarily in contact with, just because of the loss of habitat. Right. So absolutely an important point. Well, thank you, Donny, and feel free to jump in at any time. This is how this works. We want to make sure that we can, learn from each other. Let's bring up John. Hello, John.
Hello.
Again, I think one of the next countries. Donny, leave if you want to. You can leave your camera on so we can see you. But if you have to leave, that's okay too. But come on back.
I'm still here. I was
okay, good. Yeah. People love the artwork behind you. That's mostly it. So, John, we are doing this in kind of the again, like I said, the way that these countries sort of came into our zeitgeist, and we certainly began to hear about South Korea. And one of the things that's remarkable about the way South Korea was presented was this incredible success, right? That South Korea was able to do this. And we know we can talk testing and all these various things that South Korea just really organized better. So we want to learn a little bit about, what is it about South Korean culture or their government or society that would have made it such a successful take on this? And what have you been thinking about as a scholar of Korea when you're encountering not only what's going on in Korea, but how people are talking about Korea? So what are your thoughts, John?
Well, thank you. I don't know if what I'm going to say first is going to answer those questions, but I'm happy to talk about those questions. And I was actually in Korea during the MERS outbreak a couple of years ago. And it's an interesting comparison that I think we can establish between what happened then and what's going on now. What I did want to do is actually tell a little bit of a story about the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis and ongoing attempts to deal with it in South Korea. Being stuck at home, it makes it a very nice escape to listen to a story, tell a story. So I hope that I could tell a little bit of a story.
Please.
So I like to talk today about something of an unconventional pair, that is the COVID-19 crisis and potatoes. And I'd like to talk in particular about their fascinating intersection in the Gangwon province of South Korea. So Gangwon is in the northeast region of South Korea, up near the border that separates north and south. It's a mountainous, mostly rural and agricultural province that's famous for crops that tend to do well in cooler weather. So wheat, asparagus, certain mushrooms, certain root vegetables, and also potatoes. So as in many other countries across the world, the South Korean agriculture economy has been hard hit by the COVID-19 crisis, obviously. On the production side, this is because many of the foreign workers that had been working on farms in South Korea, as they do in the US and in other contexts, have been leaving the country since the number of cases has grown. On the consumption side, this is because the restaurant crisis and the closing of schools fundamentally upended established networks of wholesale distribution consumption, etc., for agricultural products. So many agricultural areas in the country have been left with tons and literally tons of produce unable to be sold. This was the case in Gangwon province, especially in relation to its potato crop, which relied heavily on the consumption of fried potatoes and the like in bars, restaurants, schools. Fried potatoes everywhere
we should have some. It's a happy hour. We should have some right now.
Right. So those are school kids love to go into the cafeteria, see fried potatoes. Right. So it was a staple at schools. Right. Schools have been closed. All of those potatoes going into cafeterias, right, are now sitting in farmers' storehouses. So here's where the story gets a little bit more interesting. The current governor of the province was once the CEO of one of Korea's largest broadcasting networks. And one of his young employees convinced him to use his as well as her media savvy to help Gangwon's potato farmers find homes for their mountains of crops. So he used his social media presence to announce that the provincial government would serve as a kind of middleman, supervising and partially funding the sale of Gangwon potatoes at an extremely low price. So about $5 for a box of 10 kilograms of potatoes. And that $5 included shipping. So you could get 10 kilograms of potatoes from Gangwon, including shipping, for about $5. In addition to this, he and his staff member, the one who came up with the idea, they live streamed a social media based program where they promoted the products. And they promoted them in a way that borrowed existing tropes, images, and practices, specifically from Korean popular culture, Korean youth culture, Korean internet.
K-pop.
Yes, exactly, right. So, for example, they played off the name BTS, which is the name of one of Korea's most famous and popular boy bands. And they called their potatoes PTS, right? So they started a hashtag PTS, right? This was instead of BTS. They also used the hashtag Hekkamja, which sounds like Hekkamja, which is what these potatoes are actually called. That means kind of new crop of potatoes. So they used Hekkamja, and Hek is like a slang term that young people use for something that's really cool. So they used all these methods, right, going on social media, targeting young people, right, taking up the culture, language, lingo of the internet, and they got this huge response. So on the first day, they set aside 1,400 boxes to be sold, and they sold them in an hour. And then people got to know about this, and on the second day, so many people logged on to try to buy the potatoes, the site went down.
Wow.
Then on a subsequent day, they had 8,000 boxes ready to be sold, and they were sold in 10 minutes, and so forth, until they sold basically 2 million kilograms of potatoes in a couple of days.
Wow.
And after this, in talking about this phenomenon, people coined the term online, which was pocketing, right? And it's a mix of potato and ticketing. So quite famously, Korean music groups like BTS, who you mentioned, right? They sell out stadiums in minutes, right? And so it's really hard to get a ticket. It's like a competition to get a ticket. If you get a ticket, it's this huge thing, right? So the joke here in saying pocketing was that, right? It's just as hard to get these potatoes as it is to get a ticket, right, to see BTS in a stadium.
And the potatoes are not as good dancers, but they're delicious, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, right. So they're delicious, and actually on social media, then people who got these potatoes would post, the experience of receiving them. They'd post them cooking them. They'd post images of them enjoying, their fried potato pancakes with beer, whatnot, right? So they became really hot items, right? They became hot potatoes in a different sense.
Oh, nice! I saw what you did there. I saw what you did there.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Quick question, but so you mentioned like it was popular in school lunches, perhaps, the fried potatoes, but is there anything else going on in the cultural background that would make potatoes this like hot thing, or is it just funny?
Is it just funny that it's potatoes in particular?
It's just funny that it's like everybody's latching on to this one thing.
It could have been asparagus
going on.
Well,
I wanted to ask the same question, John.
Sure.
Why potatoes? And were potatoes also very popular before this, or is it just now?
I don't know the exact logic to starting with potatoes. And one thing I'll say in a second is that they moved on to other crops, right? Including asparagus, which have been selling just as well.
Oh, okay. That's a surprise.
But it seems to me that perhaps potatoes were one of the hardest hit crops in this area because they're not an extremely popular food to eat at home in Korea, but they're very prevalent in restaurant food, in bar food, and in school food.
That makes sense, because then all the restaurants are closed, and this particular product is the one that has to be adopted in the home culture more than it was, perhaps.
Yeah, so it seems like this industry was harder hit when the wholesale distribution networks that fed into restaurants, bars, and schools went down. Harder hit than other crops, which may have easier time going into people's, daily eating at home. Right?
What's really interesting to me, John, about what you presented us with is, it kind of gives us a little bit of a glimpse of a post-pandemic or like, how do you recover? Like, what are some of the ways that societies begin to deal with gluts of crops or whatnot? And that's really interesting. It gives me some hope that we'll be thinking about these sorts of things and being able to act on these sorts of things, hopefully. But here's the big question. How much of Korean, I've heard this really interesting triangle of a sort of a business person who is also in government, and you're combining entertainment and big business as well as the power of the government. I'm wondering what is particularly Korean about the ability to do this. Is there a way that business and the government work in a way there that is different than here, or could this be replicated, or is this distinctly Korean?
I don't think I would say it's distinctly Korean. I think Korea has an extremely powerful internet culture. An extremely powerful internet culture that can propel sales, trends, discussions in vibrant ways once kind of someone bites into it. And I think what happened here was not that someone thought, oh, we'll kind of use the government to direct sell from farmers to people, right? Because that had been done before, right? What happened here was someone thought, let's do that and let's harness the power of internet culture and especially youth culture. Internet youth culture, right? Let's tap into fandom as it's emerging and kind of becoming more and more dynamic every day in relationship to K-pop, et cetera, right? So how can we connect those things? And I think that's what happened here that made it so vibrant.
And I guess the reason I ask that is because I think many people are using the Korea example when it comes to sort of approaching this medically as this great success story. And so I think I'm just trying to make a connection. Is it, was the internet involved in the reason why South Korea did a much better job at testing, at social distancing and taking this on control? Is there a relationship between the efficiency of the Korean state and culture and use of the internet in these two realms? One selling potatoes, the other is dealing with this epidemic.
I don't know. It's an interesting question. Korea has been very successful at contact tracing. So Korea has not really shut down in a systematic way businesses at all. Basically what they've been doing, people have been wearing masks, right, from early on. And basically they're doing very in-depth contact tracing. And when it's shown that someone who has been in contact with a positive case has gone to a specific establishment of any type, right? They close it temporarily, they disinfect that place, and then they reopen it. So the ability to contact trace, I'm sure, is in some way technologically, right, driven and mediated. Whether we could connect that to internet culture, I'm not really sure, but
that's an article for the future.
Yes.
I want to get to Claudia's observations next, but I did want to just mention Rebel Summer. We can always count on Rebel for some interesting tidbits, and I'll let John weigh in on this. I think everyone can see these comments over here in the chat function about Koreans not eating potatoes. A poor substitute for rice was more popular in North Korea in the old days. And I'm not going to try to pronounce that phrase, but John, does that seem somewhat accurate to you?
Yeah, so In the past, yes, rice, especially white rice, was what those who were well off ate, right? And other grains were either mixed into rice or were eaten instead of rice, other grains and other starches, including potatoes, right? When people couldn't eat rice as their main staple. So that is in the background of this. But cultural understandings of starches and grains have changed a lot. So I'm not sure how much we could.
The whole world eats
touch,
French
yeah.
fries. So,
Right.
well, thank you for that. And again, well, we can revisit these in other. I noticed Paul Rudder had an observation: Koreans don't eat cheese. I bet there are some Koreans who eat cheese. I'm just going to go out on a limb here, but we can address that in the question and answer session at the very end. But I want to, Claudia, if you could get your microphone on, and we'll pull you up here. Welcome, Claudia. And we have your particular perspective, of course, is Iran, your home country, and what you've been able to have communication with people in Iran. So you've already engaged in some communications and collecting ideas. So tell us about what the experience of COVID has been like in Iran.
So, yeah, I left Iran 14 years ago, and back then I was a tenured professor there. So on social media, I still have my students and colleagues following me. And I want to just pick up on John's ideas about internet and social media. And since our lives in the, this social distancing and stay at home situations have become basically virtual, I want to say that I started having observations about people's concerns when they were posting them on social media. And then I picked up on the concerns about relationships, and I started this research, which is in the very beginning stages right now. But it's going to be an official article later. I'm working on it. It just started last week. And I call it Love on Hold, or Love Virtual Love. I noticed that, for couples, the relationships have changed, and for parents with their children, including myself, my family lives in Los Angeles, and I was supposed to actually fly into LAX this Saturday, and I had to cancel my flight visiting my parents after a year. Because my parents are, senior, and I don't want to endanger them, put them, at risk. So I noticed that at this specific time period, love has become basically not the traditional way of loving, and rather like avoiding that love that we would traditionally express. So I wanted to look into, for example, I saw many pictures of people's weddings on social media when there is no one, and even it is officiated via Zoom. Wow. Like the weddings. So, and these are personal pictures, so I couldn't share them, but I started thinking about this observation, and I wanted to explore the different ways that people express their love at this time period, and how this social distancing and staying at home orders are impacting people in Iran in terms of their relationships. And this is something that, because I also specialize in gender and sexuality, so I focus on human connections and all those different layers of gender nuances in my observations and my research and teaching and everything. So I wanted to see, what's going on and how this is impacting people. So I posted a question on my Instagram story asking people to tell me how it is going for them, and how is this social distancing impacting their relationships. I also asked some of my friends to post on their Instagrams, and then people would send messages to us. So far, I have received 16 responses, which is not a lot. I'm aiming at around 50 maybe for this paper, but I will have to post it several times to get to there. But there are very interesting responses and people are very genuine, and I want to highlight some of those for you. And if we have time, I will read some of them for you.
Sure.
And these were all in Farsi, so I had to translate them. So 18% of the people told me that because they have more time and they are not busy with their jobs, their relationships have improved.
Which is
This
hopeful.
is interesting.
Yeah.
Then 25, this is very interesting, 25% of them are concerned about their partners or their family members, like their children, and they try to avoid, contacting with them or being in close proximity to them because they fear that they will be carriers, asymptomatic carriers, and will give that to them. Or, for example, I had this instance of a woman whose husband is a doctor dealing with COVID patients and who got the virus himself. He was COVID positive, and she was so concerned and she went through the hell. And then 38%, this was the highest, 38% of people who answered to this question were people who were talking about their marriages and relationships being on hold. So either they were dating or they were close to getting married, and now they cannot because they are scared to get people gathered in one place, and then it's, the spread of the virus and all of that, or because they were dating and now there is this pause. This pause is impacting in various ways and giving them some moments of reflection and thinking whether or not this relationship was even a good choice or not. And so I had one person, which makes 6% of the answers, who talked about domestic abuse. And then I had two answers, which makes 13% of the answers talking about loneliness at this time and doubts about being single. Yeah. Whether or not it was a good choice to stay single, because when looking at observing their friends who are in relationship, enjoying their time in quarantine, they are doubting whether or not they made a good choice staying single. And the answers are really interesting because they are very gendered. So the answers that I got about this loneliness and doubt are from the only two male respondents.
Is it now? What's interesting, what I'm hearing is that a lot of these responses don't seem incredibly foreign to a lot of experiences that we're having here. So, is there anything that you could say, for example? Is there anything about pressures on Iranian men that they might feel more lonely? I mean, it's too early perhaps to draw conclusions, but what kind of conclusions would you draw that would situate this in Iran for us and say this is something particularly Iranian? I'm finding great comfort in realizing that people all over the world are feeling some similar things, but is there something that is particularly Iranian about this experience?
So, Max, I think this is condition, and I don't think we can make this. I only had one response where this person mentioned that before the spread of the virus, they was politically involved. They were politically involved, and they were having a lot of opposition towards women's activism. And so because of that, they were so angry and mad at the government.
Mm-hmm.
So this was before. And so because of that, they hated even the people, not just the government, but people too. And they wanted to leave the country. But now that this has happened and they feel like this is something that we are all in it together, they feel more compassionate about their fellow citizens. And, most of the time they try to be very kind to other humans that they see.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the only response that would make a little bit of difference,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of being in Iran and women's, activism and opposition to that activism. But other than that, I think this, all the answers also show that this is a human condition and people are worried about similar things that we are worried here. For example, there are answers about economic crash and financial difficulties and worries about that, and the immunocompromised people, the elderly, concerns about those. And most of the answers about the concerns about partners and family members come from female respondents who are, if we put this in the context of my research in terms of gender, these are the caretakers most
Sure.
often. So yeah, I
It's
have.
great, and I do think I wanted to reiterate that.
I'm sorry.
We had one of those great Zoom moments where everything got all glitchy for a second. This is the new reality we live in. Continue. I was just going to say, I do want to just reiterate that I think, in fact, in John's talk, we saw this human response. I could pull that out of Korea and imagine that happening, like I said, here. I'm also seeing this great understanding in Donny when he's talking about, like, let's understand the economics and some of the reality of how these wet markets exist in the context of China and humanize it and not think of these sort of differences. And in the case of Iran, not to put too fine a point on it, but U.S.-Iranian relations since at least 1954 have been very, very troublesome and, and up and down. And of course, right now, about as perhaps as bad as you could get, despite, all of that's going on. We can see this great human reaction. And so some ways, this is the silver lining on an economic and personal and medical devastation that's happening, is some sense of humanity coming through here. And I do think that your article and your project will really humanize a culture that is too easy to stereotype. Did you want to share some of the actual quotations?
I just wanted to mention that the humanization of like Iran has been basically my mission, my entire research and teaching time here.
Oh, great. Well, it's
at UNC. Well, there are, I don't know, there are very long ones and there are shorter ones, but there is this story of a mother who had had fever and fatigue. I'm not going to read word by word. I'll just tell you the story. Who had fatigue and fever because she had traveled for a job. And then when she got back, because she had that, she thought, even though she went to doctor and it was confirmed that this is just a flu, she isolated herself in a guest room from her 1-year-old child and from her husband. And she talks about the child screaming and crying the entire time, but she herself not being able to hug her or kiss her or comfort her. And that after that period, when they came back together, even though they value each other and each other's presence, the child still cries after any of his parents leaving home, because he felt abandoned at that time by the mother. So now he feels that any one of the parents, when they leave home, they will abandon him. And that has impacted her in terms of having nightmares at night and thinking that this is going to, the losing of the family is going to happen any moment.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a very human story. I mean, who couldn't relate to that cross-cultural story and impact of that? I'm really looking forward to this project, and I'm really inspired that you've been inspired to take this on, when such, it happens, we might as well turn it into our scholarly project. John, are you going to be pursuing the potato chip story as a scholarly project, a potato story?
I'm not sure at the moment. I don't want to take on too many things at once, but I'm definitely going to be following it because I think it's really fascinating. As I said, right, so they moved on to all kinds of other things, including asparagus. I think, right, the interesting question in a way is when we see, right, existing modes of governance, distribution, and consumption, right, faced with this crisis, right, we see how they adapt, right? We see how they take on images, practices from other domains, right? In this case, right, from youth culture, from internet culture. And I think one of the interesting things it will be to see whether that continues to happen after the crisis passes, right? Or whether this is a kind of blip on the radar. So will this fundamentally change, right, practices of governance, consumption in Korea or in this province? Or will things kind of go back to the way they were after? That's an interesting question. I mean, I also just wanted to mention, I mean, one of the things that interested me about this was, in a way, how it echoes what we've kind of been experiencing in academia, right? We have these remote teaching capabilities, right, that have been growing, have been developing. They've been there, they just haven't been, right, implemented at the scale that suddenly they're being implemented at, right? And that's transforming how we teach, how we learn, et cetera. In other domains, like in, right, selling potatoes, selling asparagus, right? You have this whole technologically mediated, right, internet world that was developing on its own, really in the realm of popular culture, youth culture, that gets drawn upon all of a sudden, right? And one of the things we'll see is whether, right, that kind of intersection continues to be a dynamic one and a productive one, or whether they kind of, right, disambiguate from each other. In the same way, we'll be wondering that about teaching and learning, right, at the university, right? Now that things have gone virtual, right, when we go back to not teaching virtual, right, will we bring pieces of that experience with us? And one of the things I love, I'll just say this about teaching online, is the fact that you can have students participate verbally or via chat.
Yeah.
And I have all these students who somehow, I mean, it's not that hard to understand, will participate via chat in a way that they didn't participate verbally in class. And I just think it would be great if there's a way that we could preserve that in the future, right? So that there were multiple ways that students could.
Yeah, I had just started this semester using the Poll Everywhere business. I don't know if you've used that in a classroom yet. And I teach a small class in the fall and a large class in the spring, and I had just started using that technology. But it's a perfect transition that you said that, because we do in fact have a question that has been delivered. And the question is for Donny from Haley Wagoner. And it's, I'll read it for you quickly. So one of the theories floating around the internet and in American media is that China created the virus to unleash upon the world. And while there are several scientific articles that refute this theory, there are still many people in our country who believe this to be true. How would you respond to someone who voices this opinion about China?
Yeah, thanks, Haley. That's a great question. We were talking a little bit more about the food conspiracy theories, but this theory that it came from a Chinese lab in Wuhan or something along those lines, some sort of weapon of biological warfare, was there at the very beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, and it's become a lot more popular recently, obviously with Donald Trump about a week or two ago responding to a question and saying he would have authorities pursue that investigation. So he kind of gave a little bit of credence to it, and it got a bump in news cycles. But just like with the food issue, I have to stress the historical background to this idea of biological warfare, you know, to blame some sort of epidemic on or something like that. I mean, going all the way back to the Korean War, the Chinese had a sort of line that Americans were using biological weapons and dropping biological warfare things over Manchuria. We brought that to the UN. It was a big story. These conspiracy theories about biological warfare come up all the time in the same way that the bat suit narrative comes up, to just create something tangible that people can grab onto and blame, when there's actually much, much more difficult, complex issues at stake. For example, overpopulation or environmental issues that are causing these diseases to evolve, antibiotics being overused in agriculture and animal husbandry. When these complex issues are actually probably to blame, it's so much easier to just grab onto a story that assigns neat and definite blame to one party or another. And I'd like to point out that maybe you mentioned it, but the Chinese are also doing the exact same thing to the US. In Chinese conspiracy theory circles, they say it's an American weapon of biological warfare.
Unleashed on China first, which makes, you know, almost makes more sense in a way. If you're going to be a conspiracy theorist, it would be where it first appears would be where it was first put into the population, right?
Right. And I'd also like to point out that those conspiracy theories in the US didn't start to gain too much traction until the US overtook China in confirmed cases and deaths. So you can correlate the fact that at that moment, people were searching for someone to blame more so than the preceding weeks.
Yeah. And certainly when it comes to the different responses of governments, if a government wants to deflect blame in particular, or not even, the supporters of that government, there have been a lot of people suggesting that the United States was not prepared and that there were human decisions that led us into this particular situation. So let's focus on this particular scapegoat. I think this is an old political tool. It's been around a while. Hey, I want to thank all three of you for doing this. I have a few announcements. I want to get Donny to share some things with us. I wanted to just make a few things known. We will have all of these appear on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube to Carolina Public Humanities, it takes us a little while to edit these out, but we even put in biographical information so you can find out who these folks are. We can provide you with the links to all of the bios of our particular speakers so you can find out more about them. You can write Claudia and congratulate her on this momentous day today. So congratulations, Claudia, it's fantastic. I wanted to just remind everyone also that you can donate to Carolina Public Humanities. And I hate to be so crass at the end of a happy hour, but just to let you folks know that, of course, Carolina Public Humanities has a considerable amount of revenue that we're losing out on from our public programs. And you can go to humanities.unc.edu. You'll notice Paul has been putting up some links down here for our happy hour page. And there is our link right there, humanities.unc.edu giving. If you are inclined to help us through this period, we promise we'll be back better than ever, but we could use your support and we appreciate any help you can give us in this trying time. So consider that. And Donny, I want to quickly mention we have our events again, our Think Fast Forum next week at this time. Actually, it starts at 6:30. On May 6th, our Talking Humanities event. We do not have a happy hour on May 7th. On May 14th, we'll be back with happy hour. But Donny, you have an event you'd like to tell us about as well.
Yeah, I'll give a shameless plug to, I've pursued this sort of food morality and historical context question to my wit's end. So I've called in a couple of food historian experts from around the US, and I'm putting together a panel called it's Diet, Morality, and COVID-19, Chinese Food and Diet and Historical Context. That's going to be happening just after finals are finished here at UNC. So about 3 weeks from now, May 14th is a tentative date. So just be on the lookout for that event.
We will promote it, of course, and so you can always tune into the Carolina Asia Center, but you can also go to humanities.unc.edu, follow us on Facebook. Last words, Claudia, any last words you'd like to share with us? Tenured professor Claudia Yaghoobi?
Well, I mean, going in alignment with my research project, I hope everybody will keep in touch virtually, loving everyone at this time and being more compassionate and kind.
Good. Thank you. John, last words?
I don't think I can add something better than that, so
Okay.
I'll just pass. Thank you.
Okay, just eat potatoes. Grab your Korean potatoes. And Donny, last words?
Claudia and John, really enjoyed meeting you. Really interesting research that you guys are doing right now. It's been fun. Thanks, Max.
All right, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Follow us on Facebook, humanities.unc.edu. We'll see you next week for the Think Fast Forum and our restaurant event on Wednesday. Thank you one and all for keeping us going. Carolina Public Humanities, and once again, thank Claudia Yaghoobi, John Keefe, and Donny Santacaterina. We appreciate everything that you've done for us for joining us today, and we appreciate all of you out in the audience for joining us today as well. Thank you, and have a good night. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.